Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It's good to be here, and it feels like we haven't spoken for a while because I guess it's been 2 weeks. Pascal had I will put in quotation marks holiday because it probably didn't feel like a holiday.
Yeah.
So you could let the listeners know about your holiday.
I don't know if I want to complain because I'm in a position of a privileged position that I'm capable and able to take holidays. I do still remember the time, Steve, when we even had it in our contract of being able to actually take holiday and never really took any kind of holiday. And now I'm finally able to, from a mental perspective, even take the holiday. So I don't even want to complain, and I can laugh about the situation because it's also self-induced. We decided to get the puppy. The others still went to the snowboarding trip. I stayed at home to take care of the puppy. And I was so frustrated. It was so much work just taking care of the puppy by yourself. If you still want to do the other things that you're normally doing and you can't really leave the puppy at home by himself and stuff like this. So yeah, I was just like massively frustrated. And especially it kind of added into the entire mix that the others had a freaking fantastic holiday. They were in the mountains. For me personally, the last year on a snowboarding trip was the best holiday that I've ever had. And just hearing that my family is then there, the weather was freaking fantastic as well. And they had a great time. And I'm just sitting there at home freezing my balls off because the dog is always wanting to go in and out. And there was a storm during that time. So he always came back into the apartment super dirty. I was just frustrated. That's basically the moral of the story. It was probably the worst holiday that I've ever had. But once again, I can laugh about it because it's self-induced and it's not as bad as other people have it. So it's just like, it just sucked balls. That's what it is.
Kind of that short-term pain for hopefully long-term pleasure with the dog. Because we obviously didn't have Ada from a puppy, so we didn't have to deal with a bunch of those things. But I can still remember, like I had no idea. I never had a dog before. So then I was like, oh shit, I have to take care of this thing. Yeah. I was like, always like, is she okay? What's happening? Whereas now it's like, just happens in the background. It's not an issue. Take them for walks. They're fine. So I can definitely see how it was stressful, but it's funny because it was completely self-induced, like you missing the holiday, everything.
And I even said to you, Steve, that sometimes I was in a position of like, I hate this fucking shit. I want to get rid of the dog again, right? And I heard though from so many other people that so many people go through that exact time and period in the age of, or when they get a puppy, and they've never had one before and they don't know what it's like, that there's always that moment where they question their own decision. And I had it, and it was probably compounded due to the fact that the others were probably on a very, very nice trip that I decided myself to not go to or participate in. And of course, that just compounds. And then, the good thing is, though, it's already paying off the work that I've put in during this week with trying to train him in regards to, just everything, right? Because Katie came home. The first day was still a little bit frustrating because he was super energetic, super kind of all over the place due to all of the impressions. All of a sudden, there are 2 kids and also Katie, which is a little bit too much for him. But then the next day was super smooth. And ever since then, it is lovely. So it's already paying off, you know. And for Katie, it's weird, right? Because she comes home, the only thing that she's experiencing is that it's a lovely experience. Whereas I was always, each and every single day complaining about how fucking awful it is. But yeah.
What was I going to say? He's not at the age you can walk him yet, is he?
I mean, he's now in his 15th week, so we are walking him. And in the first week, though, and it's still like this. You're going out, and he's just still kind of so overwhelmed by all of the smells, all of the impression. He's not poo-pooing outside. He's not peeing outside, just in our garden yet. Just because whenever we are going out on a walk, no matter how long it is that you're walking for, he's just overwhelmed by everything else. You know, and then he's stopping over there. So it's not really walking. right? And but it's getting better. It's getting better, and things are getting smoother as well. And one step at a time, and we are getting there.
I'm bad for, like, with Ada on the lead, where kind of you're meant to, and I'll kind of associate this with fitness in a sense. I remember it in prep, because I have steps to do, and I'm like, I'm on this walk, I only have so much time, I need to get in these steps, so you need to just fucking come with me. Like, I'm not stopping, let you sniff everything and try and train you whilst I'm walking. So that didn't help. But you get to a position where they're walkable and you can kind of use it to your advantage in terms of getting, if it is part of your like want to get step.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's so hard to remind yourself that this is a fucking baby that is doing its thing, you know? Walking around, you just easily forget about it because they are growing so quickly. But that's why you always need to remind yourself that everything is new to him. He needs to learn everything, basically. Also with commands and stuff like this, and we will get there. And I will get there to the point where he's such a good companion that we will go out on my walks, basically, without a leash and just like, I don't know, follow along, you know?
Yeah, that's the dream. Like, I just know Ada she's never going to get to that point because she's oh man, you should see her some evenings when like a fox walks past and she just goes absolutely ballistic, like her hunting.
But I could also assume, or I would assume that in London, it's a little bit of a different beast anyway.
Oh yeah.
Due to the traffic and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's too dangerous, really. Like, even by the park that we walk in, there's just like a main road immediately there.
And also too many other dogs maybe. And yeah, just too much going on, I would assume. Yeah.
But yeah, very exciting that's all kind of moving forward. I know every dog year is 7 human years, so like you have to multiply their age by 7. So
yeah, he's slowly already coming into puberty. He's starting trying to get on to our legs already. You haven't had him, what's it called, like getting rid of the chop? No, not yet.
And that's a decision you have to think about. I don't know. I think from what I gather, it's normally easier if you are new to them versus keeping them there. And I don't know they don't really, they get over it, I guess, but it is a big.
So that was my week in a nutshell. Basically, not a good one. So complaining, but everything's fine. In regards to you, Steve, everything's fine again in regards to kind of your sickness. Are you back to training, back to normal?
Yeah, so when we last spoke, I think I was in my active rest. I don't think I'd started dieting just yet. I'm now like a week and a half into my mini cut, which is going super smooth. I feel so much better. And this is actually, I had made a note. I want to now and then make notes for these to think about things to bring up. Because sometimes you ask me like, oh, what have you seen this week? And I'm like, okay, I'll have a think about it before we chat. But it kind of reinforced to me, and this should be obvious, but I think because you're so in the mix of things with your training and pushing, you forget, but like the benefits of an active rest, like just having that kind of a week completely off and then like just over half a week of like barely training, I just felt so fresh coming into this new block of training, despite having been sick as well. And obviously it was a combination of things where I was like peak mass, like probably like overreached maybe, and obviously the sickness, and that all kind of lifted at the same time. So I started feeling real good. But I can just feel everything in the gym I can just feel it more. Like I can feel the contractions better. I'm getting away with, I need less volume to get the same sort of stimulus that I previously was getting. And I don't feel as like systemically taxed after movements where I was just like a couple of sets of like Smith machine squats and I felt trashed. Whereas now I'm like, I could probably do a bit more now. So that all came together, and it was a good reminder of the benefits of taking obviously deloads, but like active rest as well, intermittently now and then, I think can be really, really helpful for people. And I think it's just easy. It's so funny. Someone commented somewhere, it was like, why is it harder for us to take a week off the gym than it is to like just keep grinding through feeling a bit shitty in the gym? You know what I mean? Like really hard training.
I mean, I've gotten to the point where I actually have an easy time taking those weeks, because I've seen the value and the benefits in those. And this is also, I've reported about it in one of the latest improvement season podcasts as well, of how I go about setting up the deloads for the vast majority of my athletes, and either taking a complete week off, which is appreciated by the vast majority of people, or those who still want to go in and train, only having like 2 sessions, and that in the midst of the deload, so that you have like 3-4 rest days leading up to then 2 sessions, very light sessions, and then 3 to 4 days again of rest. And to me personally, this has been the best strategy so far, and I really do appreciate them, because once again, I've seen over and over again the benefits in it. And it would be foolish then not to appreciate it or to look forward to a period like this if you know how valuable it is in then the outcomes and returns afterwards.
Yeah, I guess I'm not so much talking about deloads, because I definitely like barely do anything in my deloads, to be very honest. Like I still very often keep the routine, like I said before, and I go in, but I'm not like you kind of put in your reel today, where you're just like, you can't go too easy. And that's always the mentality I have when I go in there. I'm just like, I'll go through the motions. It breaks up my day and I'm not doing anything much. But that's like the back-to-back like the extended deload, where you have that extra time to like the active rest. I think that gave me a little bit more. But I guess the easy way to auto-regulate those is like, but sometimes it's hard. You finish the deload and virtually always you feel good to get into more training.
Yeah.
Maybe now and then, and maybe this is the time, but it's hard to be objective with yourself, where you finish a deload and you're like, am I really up for training again? Or am I still feeling a bit like, And then that's when it's like, right, take a few more days to just recover.
Just to clarify, you then talk about a setup like we've discussed in the past, active rest, and then maybe a deload, and then followed by active rest. So basically a period of time of like more than 1 week of kind of not really being away from the gym, but lower training frequency and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess I distinctly call an active rest when it is that 2 weeks of like,
all right,
basically barely any training. So it's a bit distinct to a deload, where I call it deload. Like a deload could be a week off, like it's 1 week, whereas an active rest is normally like 2 weeks, basically. Okay, that's, I guess, differentiate.
Okay, then I have to agree with you, because I have an easy time taking a week away from the gym. Everything longer than a week, and my mind is playing tricks on me and starts to convince me that I have to go back.
Yeah.
And I'm getting like that anxiety, inner anxiety of like, I need to go back, which is foolish, because you know that you haven't really lost anything and you will not lose anything additionally in those couple of next extra days or so. But something there's a voice in the back of my mind saying like, mate, if you don't go to the gym now, you will lose everything. So go into the gym. You have not been training for a week already. Everything more now is just exponentially decreasing all of the adaptations that you have made up to this point.
Whereas I almost feel like it's, for us who feel that way, it's almost the opposite, where we get so much more from taking that extra week like away. And I felt that, and that's where that was the reinforcement. Like, Steve, fucking take a couple of active rests a year, mate. Like, and that's where actually it brings us back to holidays, where me and Charlotte are so terrible at freaking taking a holiday that we're like, yeah, we'll take one, and it gets pushed back. Oh yeah, we'll take one.
Wait a second, before we are actually then getting to your holiday, just one more thing then around kind of the active rest and stuff. Steve, do you find that with more training experience, those that longer times away from the gym have less of a negative impact on your training performance?
It's a good question. I don't know if I thought about it enough when I was training at a like younger age or a younger training age. I very rarely ever even thought about taking like, apart from deloads, which I would do-ish, I very rarely ever took more than like a week away from the gym. I was worse than I am now.
It would make, theoretically speaking, it makes a lot of sense to me in my head, because lifting I see as a skill. Neurologically speaking, it probably is a skill, right? Because you're just repeating a certain movement pattern. The more often you do it, the more efficient you get at it as well. So it just makes sense that if you've done something for 20 years, that if you then take 2 weeks off, that you probably won't lose a lot, because those neurological skills have been ingrained so much already. However, you've probably also already heard from people who haven't been lifting for that long that they feel that their strength is dropping quite drastically, and also that things are feeling very rusty when they are coming back from even just a deload or so into the first week of their mesocycle. And what I found to be the case is that it's most often with the individuals who haven't been training for such a long time yet.
I think that, like I was trying to talk through my own experience, and I'm not sure I can objectively or even subjectively tell you how things have been, but at least from what you're saying, that makes complete sense. And I know it's been shown in the literature as well that like we lose adaptations way slower when you're more advanced, whereas you lose them much faster when you're less advanced, which kind of again makes sense because they've just been so ingrained for such a period of time. The body's like, well, you've had this for ages, why would we get rid of it? Whereas if you just acquired a skill, I can see why if you just miss one practice, it's like, oh no, now I've forgotten how to do that. Because and you can all feel that with exercise technique, with like you do a movement you haven't done in a while, and then the next week you're like, it's back, it's locked in, I ain't got a problem.
Yeah, and for me personally, it's also like if I haven't been training for a week due to a deload or so, I just come back and it feels like nearly the week before leaving for that deload. I'm not losing the skill of the mind-muscle connection or engaging a specific muscle group or getting a pump or anything I like. It's kind of like as if I've never taken a rest. But I took the rest, reset some of the systems and stuff in my body, basically, feel more refreshed and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't lose those skills that I had beforehand.
Yeah, I think it's actually really interesting. I guess it's like the same, like you don't make adaptations as quick when you're advanced. You just don't lose them as when you become advanced. And it makes sense that your training, therefore, would just be way more static and samey than ever before when you're more advanced, versus it changing more frequently because you're not like as a more novice lifter. Yeah, things are like rapidly adapting, so you can like lift a PR every week maybe, whereas fast it's like maybe a PR every meso would be great, and if that can keep going. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. So in regards then to holiday, you had a plan and discussed with Charlotte to go on holiday. What happened to that? Is it still on the cards? Is it kind of delayed indefinitely?
So I'm trying to get us to book it, but Charlotte's like, I don't know, we need to research it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, man, we're considering Cape Verde, but they don't have vegan food, basically.
Where is that?
It's basically just south, and it's just off the coast of Africa. So it's actually great because the flight's maybe 6 hours. It's like 25 degrees, and they're on the same time zone, so you don't like get any jet lag or anything like that. So really great.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
They don't have much vegan food, and this is where like her diet just makes it a bit hard because it's just like part of the holiday. For me at least, and for her, is like enjoying going and having meals out and stuff, and like it's just pretty shitty. Like it's shitty if we have to cook in every night. It's like we barely do that at home. So it's like going on holiday, I don't know. So it's a bit of a stumbling block. The other option is then somewhere like Tenerife or the Canary Islands. They're not as hot, but they're a little.
Yeah.
So somewhere around there anyway, it's just going to be like a bit of a like relaxing, hotter holiday. Yeah. That's kind of what we're looking for. But
I can see it. I can see it, of course, when you want to have a relaxing holiday for sure. When it's more like traveling and experiencing different cultures, experiencing or discovering a new country or so, I wouldn't pick it by my cuisine or the way that I'm eating, to be honest.
Yeah, it just makes it a bit... I don't know, I'm obviously not vegan, but when I consider, I don't know, I just like pick up like some cereal and I'm like, oh, do you want to try some to Charlotte? And she's like, is it vegan? And I'm like, oh, fuck, I forget even like cereal has like milk in it sometimes. It's like, Jesus. And she's like, vegan. It isn't like, I don't know, oh, I'll have a bit of cheese or whatever. It's like, no, she is like strictly vegan. So anyway, it just makes it a little bit more challenging. But you're like, I don't think that would stop us going there if we really wanted to go to Cape Verde. But yeah, it's just about booking it really. But that will be in a really nice spot because I remember saying in a previous improvement season where I was like, I want it ideally to be at the end of my mini cut so that my appetite's in a good spot and I can enjoy food.
And you can show off those shreds.
Like, I don't care about that, but it's nicer being leaner for like a sunny holiday, right? Where you can. And also the tattoo can be completely healed and not have to worry about that, which was the previous concern. So yeah, I'm hoping that goes ahead. That'll be, I think, the end of February, two and a half weeks from now. Yeah, I think so, 2.5 weeks. So I'll have mini cut for 4 weeks, which is pretty ideal. Like, I don't really want a mini cut longer than that for sure. And I think 4 weeks probably makes sense to get me into, like, I generally, with mini cuts, this is my philosophy, tends to be like, try and hit new peak high body weights after each one. I'm just not sure how realistic it is for me anymore, like, to keep trying to do that, which is frustrating. But ultimately, like, if I can train well at a leaner physique, there's, like, it doesn't matter actually, because I'm like, even if you are 50, 60 pounds above stage weight, are you going to hold on to the strength and performance you have 50, 60 pounds above like stage weight when you're all the way down here? Probably not. Whereas it's more realistic if you're like 20, 30 over stage weight, that you're going to hold on to that strength as you come down, because your leverages aren't going to change like fucking crazy. So I'm not too like sad about it. We just have to see.
Totally. And I mean, this goes back to what it is that we've discussed already in regards to some people have a lower body fat settling point or range where they just feel comfortable. And why not then move up and down in that range instead of then needing to push it up high? It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because if you feel comfortable a little bit lower and your performance is still going up, what's the main driver? Is it body fat percentage, or is it kind of the performance in the gym?
Very true. It's just tough because I know you'll feel this, Pascal, when you are as, like, when you've been training as long as we are, rather than saying as advanced as we are, it makes it sound like we're actually like a good thing. It's like, it's not. If progress comes so slowly that, like, you just, like, it's not trusting the process. Like, we hate that saying, because it's like, it is the process, but it's just so slow that you're like you start doubting yourself. You question like what you're doing. You just have to keep going, and eventually you see it. It's just so slow. Like, and you don't often, and this is actually something I discussed with Ben House, where it's like tracking muscle growth progress. It's like, yeah, sure, you can, like, the best way we have is like strength PRs, basically, like in the higher rep ranges. But even then, they're not 100%, because I was looking at my bent over row form today with dumbbells, and I was like, I'm using like less load and doing less reps than I like was my PR, but my form's better. Yeah. And I'm like, standardizing like your form is actually, like, it's a key component, but it's hard because form is something that, like, there's a range of good form and technique as well. So, like, it's just such a, essentially it's like trying to measure your kind of circumference measurements every day and be like, well, you're not going to see changes on a daily basis. Like, well, we have to measure our muscle growth progress on such a extended scale that you almost don't see until you cut down and maybe even gets to stage condition to, like, identify if you like you've improved.
That's why I enjoy training so much at the moment, simply because my ambitions are different to yours, Steve. And that can be quite freeing as well, because even if I didn't gain any kind of muscle mass, I would still continue doing what I'm doing right now with full joy and happiness. Whereas you have ambitions of becoming pro. So for you, it's, of course, I want to maximize everything that I possibly can. And that, though, can sometimes add anxiety because of the things that you said, because we simply don't know up until, like, later down the line in a couple of years, right? So it's like you said, like we've discussed in the past, there are so many ways that we know create some muscle tissue. So in the end, it just boils down to ticking off those boxes often and long enough, and hoping for the best. And stressing then about the outcome doesn't really help. So for me personally, and that is so freeing, and that's why I enjoyed lifting so much, is because in the end, and that sounds very, very weird to some ears, I know, in the end, for me personally, if I were to stay the same kind of from a muscle mass perspective in the next 5 years, so be it. I still enjoy training because training gives me so much more in return. But at the same time, we also know that something is going on. If you're picking up the weights, if you're concentrated in the gym, if you're taking care of your fatigue management and all of those boxes, right? If you have like a spectrum of boxes to tick off, and the more boxes you tick off, the higher the likelihood that you're gaining, then you can be rest assured that something is happening, right? But for me personally, I'm going into the gym. I'm trying to add something, right? I'm trying to train hard. And I did my job. What comes out of it, we will see, right? And that is super freeing, super relaxing. And that just makes me enjoy the process so much, because it's not there's not just this one target that consumes everything else, and that also sucks up the joy and the happiness and takes it actually away from you, because it's that over encompassing thing now, kind of that monster of like, I need to get bigger. It's more like getting bigger is the end result and the byproduct of those other things that I do enjoy.
Yeah, I think my comments make it sound like maybe I'm thinking about it more than I am.
No,
yeah,
it didn't come across like this.
Cool.
I was just thinking about it because it can, for some people, be like this.
Yes, and I think what you described there is almost just being process oriented. Like, that's so more freeing. I have a client at the moment. He was measuring his waist every week, and we're in a mass gaining phase. And I was just like, dude, that is not going to be promoting like what we want. And like, you're going to be focusing on your waist measurement, whereas you should be focused on your training in the gym and being productive and things like this. And people get very caught up on like, again, how fast am I gaining? And it's so out of your hands. Like so many of these things, it's just like, you got to go out there, do your best job, and you'll get back what you get. And like you said, what we know about training for muscle hypertrophy is like, you have to meet these thresholds for volume and relative intensity. Once you've done that, you are growing. It's just how long do you have to keep meeting those thresholds to then see it maybe through your strength or see it like, again, it's just like through like photos and measurements at some point down in the future. But that's the only way I've managed to keep going like the way I have over the years is similar to you, is like, just go to the gym, do what you do, and like, don't hyper focus on some of these things. Whereas like, and when you start over focusing on the logbook, it can be very easy for your form just to turn to shit. Like, I don't know if you've had it with clients. I've had it with a couple recently where they really focus on beating last week's performance, but to the detriment of the quality of their technique, where they're like, oh man, I know I started using more momentum, or I cut my range of motion just to beat last week and get those reps. I'm like, actually, that's less of a quality stimulus than you repeating performance week on week, and you're creating more fatigue and risking injury by doing that. Don't worry if you can't beat last week. If you just match last week, that's okay. So yeah, it's an easy trap to get into, because we've spoken about it before, where you also don't want to get complacent, where you're just like, oh yeah, I'll just like hit the same numbers every week. It's like, well, eventually it'll probably take quite a long time though for that to come too easy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But even then, right? Even then, you can do a lot of things wrong and still probably grow if you do enough of those things correctly. So once again, you have like a range of boxes to tick off, right? It's kind of like a checklist. You are a factory worker, and you every single day you need to cross off those boxes on your checklist in order to check whether the factory is working appropriately or not, right? And if you are able to tick off enough of those, probably the factory is fine and will still be producing something. Not all of those boxes need to be checked or perfectly running as smoothly, right? If something is kind of broken, then you call up someone who's able to then fix it or so. And I think if you then do it for long enough, hey man, you've produced a lot in that time frame, right? But it is slow. It takes a lot of time, and I think that this is where many people fall short. Also because of maybe the things that we are seeing and exposed to on a daily basis. But it freaking takes a long time. And if you're then willing to put in like 10 years, man, but everyone will be able to change in 10 years, like significantly, even if you do a lot of things wrong. But I think that the time horizon of change is skewed for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's people wanted it yesterday. They wanted the muscle mass yesterday. I don't think like, if you ask me, like, well, my goal when I began lifting was never to be as jacked as I am now. Yeah. But I also was under the false impression of like, I could look like someone else, which I could never look like someone else, because you are who you are and you have your structure. And I still look at people who are less jacked than I am, but they have smaller waists and wider shoulders. And I'm like, man, that's such an aesthetic physique. And I get super like, but it's delayed gratification and you can only work with what you've got. So yeah, that's very well said. Something I wanted to, if you got something else.
Yeah, short break, and then we are back touching on another thing that I want to say about this.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
So here we are back again. Thank you very much. By the way, I just want to inform everyone that the Improving Season podcast has switched over to its own separate RSS feed. We will talk a little bit more about it by the end of the episode. One thing that I wanted to touch on, Steve, is Katie, because I was standing in front of a mirror while I was shaving myself, and then I don't have any kind of shirt on. And I said to Katie, this is probably the first time that I'm starting to be relatively satisfied with the way that I look shirtless, which hardly ever happened. And this is also a process, of course. And I know that in the future, there will be times where I'm doubting myself and questioning myself. But I also know that some people got into bodybuilding because they saw some bodybuilders and they found it amazing. For the vast majority of people, though, I don't think that this is the case. I think that the vast majority of people got into it just to look better. And when they started, they never had in mind of becoming a big, jacked bodybuilder. Now, Katie asked me, because I said, oh man, I could still use some more muscle mass. And she said, but you don't really want to look like someone like Mike, for example, right? Like that amount of muscle mass. I said, I wouldn't mind that. Maybe not Mike's physique. Nothing against Mike, maybe, but I can think of way more aesthetically pleasing physiques out there. Some are just incredible. Things that you just brought up, like super tiny waist, wide shoulders, right? Super symmetrical abs, thick chest. And I mean, if I could choose whether I should look like me or someone like this, man, give me that physique. Honestly. And this is never something that I've aspired to when I started out, because I thought that it's way too big, way too muscular. And now, man, give me that physique. Come on, please.
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Marky Mark. He was my inspiration from his Calvin Klein adverts.
Yeah,
and he is that guy, because he's quite short and he has quite a thick chest, nice abs, small waist. And then I have more muscle than him now, but still, I think he probably looks more aesthetically pleasing than what I do. But it's just you've got what you got. You have to play with the cards you're dealt with.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
So, and Chris Elkins comes to mind when you spoke through what you said, because he's just like a genetic gift in his structure and everything, and the way his abs are and thick chest and everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is I'm interested in, because we spoke about this before, where I was talking about lengthened partials, and then you were speaking about, I know you like doing kind of a peak contraction and then controlling the eccentric on some of your pulling, which is kind of a little bit counter to a lengthened partial, because in the lengthened partial, you're not even getting into that short position. You obviously control the eccentric like you can. But I've not got any lengthened partials in my program at the moment, which I did for the last mesocycle. And the reason being is for none of the movements I'm doing right now, it feels like it makes sense. For everything I'm doing, for a bent over row, the lengthened partial, I'm just not sure how that would even go for me. I'm not sure the SFR would be great. And then for a chest supported machine row, I played more with that peak contraction and then controlling it. And the great thing the peak contraction does is I'm not looking for that squeeze necessarily. And I think there's anything about that short position. And the same with the assisted pull-up, but getting to that top position, holding it for a moment, allows you to then really control immediately the eccentric. Whereas if you don't pause at all, or you maybe rush that portion of the movement, you can't control that immediate eccentric. And it's super easy at that short position as well on a machine row or that assisted pull-up, so it's not tiring. And then just controlling the eccentric from the shortened position all as long as possible, something about that just feels fantastic in terms of the stimulus check marks that we talk about. And I can't help but think that like lengthened partials are not obviously making use of the whole eccentric. I feel like maybe is there something to the lengthening of the entire muscle? I don't know. But yeah, it was just something I threw out there. It's like complete anecdote, like thought. And I know actually, I think Mike has, he's providing some like money to Milo and like their research team to be able to do like looking at kind of the different ranges of, not ranges of motion, the like eccentrics, concentrics, like tempo and everything like that. Cause I have a feeling there's something there, but again, that's just like, I guess it's the bro bodybuilder in me thinking about like pump and disruption and like, oh, I really feel it when I do that. And I know you like it too. So I thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah. So when it comes to pulling movements, it's not that I pause for a long second or anything like. It's more like you are using the momentum and moving with the weight. And while you're doing that, you are kind of holding that. It's hard to describe. If I were to just like say, I love the hammer strength machine where it's kind of chest supported and seated there. I've talked about it where I'm occupying that machine like for an entire session.
Did you see the comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that legit? Was that a legit comment or were they joking? So. Okay.
I would be surprised if they are actually training in my gym. But there it is, kind of when I'm doing the single arm rows to begin with, right? I'm leaning into the pull. And then while I'm coming back, I already can now feel it. And my elbow isn't as far behind as I could pull it, right? And I'm already kind of squeezing and trying to hold it there. And then while I'm coming back, kind of moving with the weight a little bit. Same goes, a good example is kind of bicep curls. What I really want is not kind of going from fully stretched all the way up here. What I'm concerned about is stretch and then very much getting that squeeze into the bicep. You don't even have to fully flex the elbow, in my opinion, but you need to come to the point where you have the feeling as if the bicep couldn't contract even more so. Right, that full-on squeeze. And that works particularly well on something like the D-handle cable curls, for example. From behind, exactly. And that is something, I don't know what it is, that just feels incredible and super productive. And I can't really pinpoint it to what it is, whether it is maybe then the blood accumulation, so the pump, that then also just makes me suggest and assume that there must be something to it with nutrient delivery and all that kind of stuff, and that cell sweating that is then creating some kind of anabolic stimulus also. Another thing that could be said is the eccentric on something like a lat pull down or machine assisted pull up. When you are coming up to peak contraction and then slowly coming down and controlling that, that is feeling insane. This is the part of the movement that feels the craziest to me personally. And if I were to neglect that part of the movement, I just have the feeling, and this isn't backed by any kind of scientific literature as far as I know, but if I were to neglect that, I would miss out on a lot.
And that sounds like my experience with the assisted pull-ups, where you just can't control the eccentric on a normal pull-up like you can on an assisted pull-up. Yeah. And it was just like, I could feel like my back, I could feel the stretch and it kind of ripping apart as I was coming down. Like you could almost feel it, which is a weird sensation. So yeah, it's just something interesting to me because I wonder if, I'm very interested in, like, obviously we're not going to ignore science and like I've been playing around with the lengthened partials, but I can't help but think when you limit exercises and you miss things. It's kind of like the example I think about is like a seated leg curl to a lying leg curl. A lot of people would look at that study and be like, oh, the seated leg curl saw better hamstring hypertrophy, but it's like, oh, but the lying grew the sartorius more. And it's like, if I never did lying, I wouldn't grow my sartorius as well as I could. It's like, well, if you always train with lengthened partials, maybe you're missing out something from a full range of motion, something there from the eccentric. It just makes me worry when people are like trying to isolate things too far. It's kind of similar to like, I don't know, biasing every single back movement to like upper back and like rear delts and like I'm going to hit this specific like crest of the lat here through so many different movements. I'm like, are you missing something out from like a just holistic bent over row pattern or like a holistic like arch and retract fully like rowing motion? I'm not saying you are. I'm just like, sometimes it makes me feel like people are pulling things too far apart and missing out on a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the listeners may know, and you may know yourself, Steve, as well, same as you, I'm not trying to neglect a scientific literature, because there's very interesting evidence coming out on a regular basis. And if it's convincing, like a lot of research has been conducted on a specific topic, then I definitely also like to take this into consideration. However, over the past years, what I found myself to drift towards is to become more and more like a bro. Like finding or listening more to than the anecdotal evidence, what I've observed with myself and my athletes, rather than taking a look at purely scientific papers and literature. Sure, once again, if there's something that is coming out, I'm not neglecting that or disregarding that. I take that into consideration, but if there's kind of one trend or hype coming up, I never really kind of immediately throw it into the programming or anything alike. I acknowledge that there's something interesting coming up, but I'm not going to change my training or programming at first. If more and more evidence is coming out over years, then all right, maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's something that we can then incorporate or so. But other than that, I like to also take things that we know work, not due to the lazy arguments of like, if it works, don't fix it. That's not where I'm coming from. But if we know that we have a sample size of thousands of people doing a specific thing that works, and the other thing is more like an idea or a hypothesis that is interesting, then I don't really want to throw out the things that we know has worked so far and the things that probably are true, especially when it comes to lifting. It's not that complicated if you really think about it, even though that we aren't 100% certain of what really causes hypertrophy so far. We have a fairly good understanding of what can cause hypertrophy and the methodologies on how to create it. So in regards to how to set up a training protocol. So I rather than keep things simplistic, same goes then for ranges of motion, for example. Why not train full range of motion? Because it has so many benefits to it. Why then just doing partials, right? When we know that the full range of motion gives us everything that we want in a safe and secure manner for the vast majority of people, why then do we want to play with the other thing? If it's not just for experimentation purposes so far, right? And the same goes for other things as well, where I have changed my stance and viewpoint over the years and reverted back to more of a kind of, if you want to term it, more bro-ish kind of style, where it's then more important to really put an emphasis on the concentration and the focus, my muscle connection, maybe the pumps, and also just like training hard. Because if you neglect that, everything else doesn't really matter. If you don't it's like the thing that I said already, if you don't bring the fire to cooking, you won't really be cooking anything, right? No matter how good the recipes are that you are having in your book, it doesn't really matter, right? And that's why I rather than focus on these things, because very often, and that is just on my experience, my own experience with myself, but especially also with nearly all of my athletes, it's very rare that someone comes to me and the form and technique is just like pristine, and at the same time the intensity and intent is there. Like 95%, maybe even more than this, you need to take care of these things. And if you know this,
fundamental.
Exactly. And if you know this, that this is the vast majority of people, then those other minute things or experimentations don't really matter at first.
I agree. And I think you're probably being too harsh on yourself, if that's the way I want to put it, calling yourself more bro-ish, because everything you mentioned there, I would still say is evidence-based, like training hard, using good range of motion, like listening to this is the thing that might be more bro-ish that we both hold on to, is like those biofeedback markers, which I find very hard to let go of, to be honest, because I've just found them so helpful for guiding my training recently and in so many different ways. And it's then like when you do experiment, like I have just on a few movements, it's like, here or there. It's not like it's taking over everything. And I'm very interested to, again, I think I mentioned to you, I'm going to interview Milo at some point, because I know he's been experimenting with just like complete lengthened partials and everything, which I want to know what everything looks like, because he's only shared a few movements and I'm like, what does like, I don't know what movement I'm thinking of, but there's some movements where I'm like, what does this look like? It'll be very interesting to see him, because it's also practically, I guess, limited. Anyway, very interesting regardless.
And it's
actually
kind of
probably.
Sorry, Steve. On that note, it's something that I've even brought up, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, when it comes to exercise selection. Even if someone were to tell me like seal rows are the best exercise that you can do for your back, man, it's a fucking pain in the ass to set it up at my gym. And I'd rather than do 2 different exercises, need to do maybe then a little bit more work, but then have the same results than doing that particular movement. And it's kind of the same there as well. Even if it were to turn out that the partials are even superior, I have a hard time that you can't accomplish the same results within full range of motion, for example.
It does make me think many roads lead to Rome.
Yes, exactly.
And like, does it like when you put it in a study and you compare like for like programs, full to partial, sure, you might get a certain outcome, but if you to kind of broaden it and you put it into more like in real world scenarios where people have different programs and they're doing different amounts of sets and they have different recovery capabilities, I don't know, it's a tougher one to pass out. And I think it's important when we're a practitioner to take care of the evidence but not ignore what we're seeing in practice either. And I think some people feel pressured to ignore what they're seeing in practice. And that's why I like keeping, as I asked Joe Bennett, which we've got a podcast coming out with him, and asked him about lengthened partials. He's like, he clearly hadn't really seen much of any of the research maybe. So it was interesting then hearing his perspective, because he's been working with people for a very long period of time at high levels. So it's like he isn't changing his training approach just because he's seeing something new. So anyway, it's just interesting, and I think a valuable perspective to bring people back to what you said in terms of the fundamental basics, which is kind of what the infographic, which I'm glad infographics are doing well on Reels. Reels. Infographics are now doing well, so you don't have to just do Reels, where I was like, this is the base of the pyramid, like focus on those little nuanced things later.
Thank you, Instagram. Thank you.
Hopefully they keep pushing photos a little bit, because that's it. I appreciate everyone who shared that, because I got a lot of shares, and I don't know. It's been hard to grow on Instagram in terms of like number of following for a long time. Reels just don't seem to get you followers. Anyway, that's another point. Do you have anything else?
On that note, one more thing, because you've been talking about practitioners. We can't neglect that the vast majority of people going into the gym aren't people such as you and I. We have a specific niche, a specific audience that we are talking to. So every one of our audience has probably then, the vast majority have probably then seen certain movements or are being exposed to those due to then them following certain athletes or certain experts in our field. However, for those personal trainers listening to us who have or who are working with Gen Pop people, if you were to come to them and say like, hey, no, don't touch the chest on the lat pull downs. Try to get to chin height. Maybe. Oh no, that was a little bit too far. It's way easier to just say like, hey, try to move it from a fully extended position down to the chest. And if you are or can't do any more of those, you're done with it, right? It's way easier than to also guide people in doing exercises as well, instead of making each and every kind of exercise, I don't know, to something that is highly complex and you need a bachelor's degree in order to understand it, just to set things up, right? Same goes for, and that's why I'm definitely not a big fan of the hip thrusts. Same goes for the seal rows. Setting it up is also there a freaking pain in the ass. Some gyms now have these hip thrust machines, which is great if you really insist on doing hip thrusts. But setting it up, especially when you're a strong individual, holy cow! It just takes you like half an hour to just like do 3 sets of hip thrusts, and then afterwards you have like bruises all over your hips. You can't really walk properly anymore. Let alone to say that you can't have intercourse with your partner anymore because everything fucking hurts. What good is it for, right? During that time, you could easily do like, I don't know, 3 sets of glute kickbacks, do some good mornings, right? You can do like 10 other sets of other movements and probably get more done in that period of time.
It's like the STR, is that it? Stimulus to time ratio? Or I want to like stimulus to pain in the ass ratio. Let's call it that way. Yeah. And it's quite literally a pain in the ass if you're doing hip thrusts. We do have we had the glute drive. I think it's like a Nautilus glute drive in Yorkies, but I haven't done anything to hit my glutes in fucking like 5 years. There's just no point. Like I just need more quads and hamstrings. Jesus, like let's not worry about those other muscle groups. In fact, I haven't actually done a lunge in ages, and I feel like maybe I should introduce a lunge at some point. Basically, I haven't done them since lockdown happened, and I was like burnt out from it. Same with back squats, though. Yeah,
just to conclude, right? If an exercise requires you to every single time explain it in depth, and the person doing that exercise simply can't figure it out over a longer period of time, is that exercise then really that good to prescribe? And I have it with certain exercises, especially something like cable crunches. It's an exercise that many people do wrong.
Yeah.
And have a hard time actually getting it right. And then you have to ask yourself, like, yes, maybe it is very, very good from a stimulus to fatigue ratio perspective. And I have a great time with those exercises, but it also took me a long time figuring it out. And then you need to ask yourself the question of, like, is it a good exercise in general to prescribe for the vast majority of people? And most of the time it isn't. Even if the scientific literature were to say, like, this is the best ab exercise that you can do, from a real life perspective, maybe it isn't.
I think we're fortunate that we work with people who, like, we get form videos and we can critique people and help them. But particularly with cable crunches are one I see butchered quite a lot, and I have to try and advise kind of clients. And even for me, it took me a while not to like just introduce hips into it. And then, you extend the back, get that big stretch on, and then you get the mind-muscle connection. Sometimes it just takes time with these movements. So I feel you on that for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Other than that, no, I haven't really seen anything particular, to be honest. What about you? Have you noticed anything or took some notes?
Oh, no, I guess the only thing that happened that I saw was, because I started reading the fucking paper again, was the diet break paper that came out, because it was pre-published that I read it previously and had Bill Campbell on the podcast about it, where it was like 6 weeks of, I think it was like, maybe it was 6 weeks of straight dieting versus 2 weeks on, 1 week off, 2 weeks on, 1 week off, 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So they dieted, well, they were in the diet for 3 weeks longer, although they were all maintenance weeks. It was like, basically didn't see any benefits to the diet breaks. Yeah. And then it came up because Menno and Bill posted about it. So I was like, oh, is this a new study? And then I started reading it. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I remember this study. And the thing I wanted to bring up was just that I found it interesting to see how hardlined Menno was with diet breaks not being beneficial. This is a direct quote, and I'm sure if I spoke to Menno, there might be more to come from this, but he said, diet breaks are a waste of time for most intents and purposes. He did say most, so I don't know if maybe that gives him something there, to be honest. He said, you're just pausing your progress, and any problems you face before the diet break will still be there. When you resume the diet, it's sticking your head in the sand. And I think most people reading that will take that as diet breaks are a complete waste of time. No one should ever do them. And all I'm saying is we shouldn't be that quick based off that one study to say diet breaks are a complete waste of time. Because who needs a diet break after fucking 2 weeks? Like in a 25% deficit. Yeah. Like, I'm like,
yeah. For
no
me
one should need one.
the study confirms my biases.
Sure. Same with Menno.
Exactly. So I shouldn't be the one to actually judge here, because for me personally, I'm same as Menno. I'm not the biggest fan of diet breaks. I've seen that they fail all too often, to be honest. Same goes for refeeds and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not the biggest fan of them. However, I am also not as extreme as at least that quote. I would also assume that Menno isn't as extreme. Maybe it is. Could very well be the case. Because I still see some validity to them every now and then. But it's more so psychological in nature. And even if it's physiological in nature, it stems from a psychological background. Whereas, like, we know that the placebo effect is a real thing. So if someone feels so much better after a diet break, so much better, and convinces themselves that also physiologically speaking, sorry for that, something has changed or had some positive impact. Hey, so well, I think it's a win then.
The thing I struggle with, the main thing I struggle with, and I'd like to know what Menno would say about this, and this might be why he is this way inclined, because he doesn't deload how maybe we deload and a lot of people deload, where it's like a week off or it's a really easy week. And if you're in a calorie deficit and you're lean and you're taking a week off the gym, I can't help but think there's some risk of some muscle loss in that period of time. I can't say you will, but I can't say you wouldn't. And so I'm like, maintenance at least secures that you're you're not. I would say I'm very confident you wouldn't. But being in a deficit during that period of time, I'm less confident.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a good point, because one is up for debate. The other one is quite certain, I would say. Or the chances of you losing anything are very much reduced. Whereas the other one, there's still a higher chance at least. Also, just there as well, from a psychological perspective, if you're very, very lean and you are convinced that something is going on, that you will be losing muscle mass during that time when you're not increasing the calories, that isn't to say that then you are going to lose muscle mass because you're convincing yourself that it is, but the stress and anxiety alone could cause you to not recover as well, to put you in a more vulnerable position. And we all know what it's like to be massively stressed out by something. And if you're then needing to endure this state, that mental state, for an entire week, what good does it do to you or that individual? Not a lot, I think.
That's kind of where I'm coming from, where I see more utility is when someone's leaner and they've been dieting for a longer period of time, that it's probably going to be more protective of muscle loss during that period of time, and also probably bolster recovery for the next mesocycle going. And that's why I say Menno might not have that approach, philosophy, because he deloads like different muscle groups at different times. So it's like, well, he's only removing a training stimulus maybe from quads. So it's not worth coming up to maintenance to just worry about quads, because everything else is being trained. And then he's deloading something else at another time. So, I mean, I've never been coached by Menno, but I know he's like reactive with his deloads for body parts that need it versus doing a holistic kind of full body deload. So I guess like lots of things where people come from, when you notice this when you follow enough kind of different evidence-based practitioners, their differences come in due to them just having different like methodologies with training and nutrition.
Yeah, I'm losing you right now.
Oh no.
But hopefully it recorded on your end when it comes to the audio. But we're coming up on time anyway, so I think it's a good time now to slowly fade out. Once again, I just want to say it another time. We've transitioned the improvement season over to its own RSS feed. I'm right now still convinced that I will release 1 or 2 more improvement season podcast episodes on the old RSS feed, just so that people are reminded and listen to it and can then head over to the new channel, basically, which is the improvement season podcast itself, separated from then the Revive Stronger podcast. The reason for it is we have now recorded, what is it now? Improvement Season podcast. We're coming up to 300 episodes. With the Revive Stronger podcast, we are now at 370 or so. And it's just a little bit too messy and I just too much, I think. And especially for newer listeners, it may be confusing. What's the difference? And they may not be interested in listening to chats that Steve and I have, but they are interested in hearing the experts talk, or vice versa as well. And that's why we decided to actually now split them in 2. You can now head over to also then Spotify. It would be very much appreciated if you then can also follow us over there at the new one, the Revive Stronger podcast episodes, and also the channel stays the same, but it will be in the future only then reserved for the Revive Stronger podcast. Once again, if you want to stay up to date with the Improvement Season podcast via your podcast provider, head over then to Improvement Season Podcast, search it there. You can find it and then follow us there. And then also, of course, give us a rating because it's always appreciated so that we can get us back to the listeners' numbers and also the following rate that we had before, because we had to throw it all away and start basically from scratch when it comes to the Improvement Season Podcast on its own channel.
I'd only say if you're watching on YouTube, this is still where we're going to be. So
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
someone asked about it on, like, they were like, oh no, I don't want to like lose you guys. I'm like, well, everything's still mushed together on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something that will change in future.
Yeah.
But for now, it's all there.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit more clear on YouTube because you can see us and you kind of get an idea of what's going on maybe. But I can definitely see how if someone's new to, they probably listen to an expert interview or something and they come see our podcast, like,
Yes.
listening and hear us talk about anime and something else. And they're like, oh, what is this? So, but
Totally.
like Pascal said, we appreciate you. Definitely subscribe to the Improvement Season over on Spotify or whatever podcast app you're listening to and give us a rating. We always appreciate that. And I know if we don't ask, many of you who would do it won't do it. But if you're still listening, you will now go and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.